a gift to Caim from his beloved father. Since he was a young child, Caim had idolized his gentle father and longed to fight strongly and bravely in battle beside him. The dark shadow of the Empire fell over their peaceful kingdom. The Empire grew stronger and stronger until one day, Caim's castle was attacked by the Imperial Black Dragons. Caim, take Furia and flee, so ordered Caim's father. But even before Caim was able to answer, his parents were slain before his very eyes. Clutching the sword that was a gift from his father, Caim swore upon it revenge for the loss of his kingdom and the murder of his parents. Even now, an unquenchable rage still fills his heart. This simple common axe is made of a shaft hewn from plain oak and head cast crudely from pig iron. A simple common old blacksmith made it at the beginning of the year in order to open the door of an old shed. Inside the simple common shed, the old man saw piled high before him the jumbled bones of more men than he could count. He told no one of this. This simple common axe, made by the simple common old blacksmith, came to be called Bonebreaker. There were two sisters who were renowned as the greatest swordsmiths in the kingdom. No matter who challenged them, none could make a finer sword. One day, a wandering bard visited their home. He sang with a voice so beautiful that the gods wept to hear it, and both sisters fell deeply in love with the kind and gallant Skald. Each of them set about making the most magnificent sword, so that they might win his love, but their bitter rivalry led them to make only dull and brittle blades. Seeing their discord, the Skald offered to take both of them as his brides. With their rivalry ended, together the sisters crafted this magnificent sword and named it the Skald Song. A long time ago, there was a small nation that was invaded by its mighty neighbor. The country was helpless as the invaders put its women and children to the sword. In the small country, there was a brave and beautiful princess who became determined to save her homeland. She disguised herself as a dancing girl and presented herself to the enemy emperor. The emperor, entranced by the beauty of the dance, immediately fell in love with the princess. But as he approached her, she plunged the sword into his breast and slew him on the spot. After that, the mighty empire fell into ruin and decline, and the princess's country was saved. To this day, every girl of the kingdom dreams of becoming the dancing princess of legend. This sword belongs to a royal family whose kingdom was destroyed by an evil dragon. The vengeful rage of the family smolders deep within the blade, hidden by the sword's gaudy beauty. Whoever takes up the sword will suffer from the family's bitter curse. Evil dreams will haunt the victim's nights until he is overtaken by a baleful death. A king of a certain small nation was struck by the sword's beauty and took it for his own. But he, too, became plagued by nightmares, and one day his life and the kingdom were taken from him by dragons. There is but one means to escape the sword's curse: slay the same dragon that killed the royal family. But no man has yet possessed the strength to cheat fate and break the spell. A long time ago, there was a dragon who could not fly. This gruff yet noble-hearted dragon had never seen a human until the day he came across a gravely injured knight. The dragon tended to the knight, but when the human opened his eyes, he stared in fright and tried to flee. In those days, wingless dragons were despised by men as ill omens. But the knight recovered, and vowed as he returned home to repay the dragon. Many years passed. One day, the aged dragon found himself surrounded by an army of men, and he prepared himself for death. "My wingless friend, it has been a long time." Striding from behind the soldiers came the king of old, now a king with an army of thousands. The dragon let out a roar of delight. In a certain country lived a feudal lord. This lord was enamored of the hunt. Each day he rode out to find animals to slay, his favorite hunting sword by his side. One evening, the animals of the forest gathered together in council. "We cannot survive much longer. We must kill the Lord if we wish to live." So the animals of the forest surrounded the Lord's manor, seeking a way in. But when the Lord saw them all, he danced with delight. So they have all gathered for the hunt. With joy coursing through his veins, the Lord rode out and slaughtered all of the animals till not one remained in the forest. By the by, the Lord lived happily unto a ripe old age. In the kingdom of the Union, a general beloved by the common people slew the wicked queen that had taken power when the king had died. The general came from the lowest classes, making a living as a murderer and highwayman. After killing his 15th victim, he was at last captured by the authorities. Judgment was swift. The sentence was death. But the general had a great advantage. He was an extraordinarily handsome man. When the queen saw him, she could not bear to have him killed. She gave the general all her love, but her love turned to obsession. She became his prisoner, and he took her throne. People who knew him came to call him the Robber King. Juices oozing from tender, succulent flesh, the sweet aroma of fine herbs, the master cook made dishes of meat that none in the city could resist. Every day, customers lined up outside his inn, waiting for the chance to partake. Even the king himself would sneak down from his castle to sample the master's art. But once he entered his kitchen, the smiling cook's face would grow stern. The meat he used was no ordinary meat. The years passed, and the cook in his inn disappeared from the town. But his cleaver remains as gleaming and as sharp as ever, waiting for its next master. In a land ruled by a gang of demons, 10 young idealists resolved to take up this weapon and rise against the evil overseers. But not one of the cowed citizenry rose to fight with them. The human rebels were nonetheless victorious. The demons were vanquished. As the rebels rebuilt the government, all agreed that the weapon they used was imbued with the power of the gods. But the young leaders began to forget their ideal of a world without fear. With secret informers and public executions, their rule turned into one of terror and tyranny. The people rose up against them. The 10 were arrested and sentenced to public execution. Once again, the people would witness the power of the weapon that had chased away the demons. When the great shrine was built, young women were chosen to be sacrifices. They plunged this cursed sword into their own hearts. The blade glimmers with the souls of its young victims. The first sacrifice was a respected and pious believer. The pure young woman was chosen to serve as the foundation stone of the new shrine. The second sacrifice was a kind girl of the village. Though sad to be chosen for death, she consoled herself with the knowledge that her sacrifice would help others. The third sacrifice was a girl who made her living as a thief. She cursed the gods angrily as her life was taken. At the moment the sword struck home, it coiled and writhed like a wounded snake. A village of serfs, suffering under their lord's corrupt government, cobbled together this mace to serve as a weapon in their rebellion. Its crooked frame was shaped by the blood of their toil. No matter how they suffered, the Lord would not grant the serfs relief. With cries of justice and freedom, they gathered into a crowd and marched against their overseer. As dawn broke, the peasants charged into the castle, but there they found the Lord living as impoverished a life as their own. For as much as the Lord taxed the serfs, so was the Lord taxed by the king. The serfs took pity on their incompetent lord and cast aside their weapons. From then on, serf and lord lived in harmony, hungry and destitute together. There was once a country founded by 2 brothers, masters of the martial arts. One brother fought with strength, the other with speed. Great friends, they ruled their country in peace. One day, a small girl asked the 2 brothers an innocent question. They say that the 2 of you have never fought, but if you were to have a fight, which one of you would win? Both answered that he himself would be the victor. Thereupon the brothers began to argue, an argument that grew more and more heated, until they found themselves in a fight to the death. Seeing the brothers battle, the angry gods hurled down this mighty spear and impaled them both. Awed by the gods' wrath, the people of the country enshrined the spear in their temple. In a northern island country there was a wise man trusted by all the people, known as a man who can see 1,000 leagues. He wandered the countryside with his staff in his hand. The staff could cure disease and injury in all those who touched it. When placed on the ground, it could make even the most barren lands fertile. If the staff was touched to a person, it could tell if that person lied or told the truth. If the staff was touched by a wicked man, that man would fall on his knee and repent all his sins. If the staff was touched to monsters, they would flee. If the staff was touched to demons, it would, with words forbidden by the gods, burn them to blackened ash. This is a mace made from the scales of a dragon. In an age long before the founding of the Union and Empire, men lived in terror of the subhumans. Tired of the oppression of the beasts, the people turned to a nameless young hero to throw off their yoke. To gain the strength he needed, the warrior resolved to enter a pact with a dragon. He challenged the dragon again and again, and lost again and again. Though he eventually beat the dragon, the creature was already pact beast to another, and the victory was in vain. But in recompense, the dragon offered a piece of her own wing. Armed with the mace forged of dragon's flesh, the warrior battled the subhumans and brought peace to mankind. This monk's spade belonged to an ugly mermaid who lived on a solitary island in the South Ocean. With her fearsome song, she would lure the islanders out to sea and feast upon their raw livers. One day, a young man came to the island seeking revenge on the mermaid for the slaying of his family. The man sliced off the mermaid's tail, leaving her on the brink of death. Unable to swim, the mermaid despaired. Seeking forgiveness, she gave to the youth her beloved weapon and begged for the return of her tail in exchange. But the youth knew that she would return to her wicked ways of terrorizing the islanders for the livers that gave her sustenance. With one thrust of her own spear, the pitiful creature was slain. A philosopher was troubled by the ancient question, what is a man? From whence is man born, and to what purpose? Did the gods place him here on this world? The philosopher brooded on this question, his eyes cast skyward for the answer. Amidst all of creation, surely mankind has a special purpose. Then the philosopher came to a realization. Amongst creation, amongst the stars, the sun and the moon, only man has the power to destroy. Proudly, the philosopher announced his discovery. In the philosopher's audience, a single old man laughed. He took out a great mace and placed it before him. Right, he said, so this is the meaning of life. A sword serrated like a saw, able to cut through enemy weapons. But with each use, vibrations shake the user's arm, causing the flesh to turn weak and translucent like wax. Many centuries ago, there was a brave knight who fought and defeated countless enemies, but as he fought, his flesh became paler and paler. Then came a war on which the fate of the kingdoms hung in the balance. The knight took the head of the enemy general and won the battle. But he had grown so pale as to be transparent. As the soldiers celebrated the victory, a single arrow struck the knight through his heart. But none could see the invisible knight, and his death went noticed by none. Hundreds of years ago, there lived a noble robber who always wore a scarlet cloak. Unsure what to do with the wealth he pilfered from corrupt merchants, he melted down to forge this axe. He was pleased with how he had disposed of the merchant's ill-gotten loot, but as he became obsessed with making the axe even more gorgeous, he started to rob the innocent as well. One day, he raided the mansion of the most powerful sorcerer in the kingdom and was quickly caught by the wily wizard. The wizard urged the robber to return to his noble ways of old, but the bewitched heart of the robber could not be swayed. The wizard cast a spell that sealed the robber in a brilliant red crystal, and he then set the crystal in the eye of the axe. There was once a small village that made its livelihood from rearing cattle, but it was terrorized by a pack of wolves that slaughtered the villagers' livestock each and every night. Desperately, the villagers tried to protect their herds, but they were defenseless against the wily white wolf that led the pack. Each night, more livestock was lost. As the situation grew more grave, some began to talk of abandoning their homes. At that, the quietest villager of all took up his spear and stepped out into the night. 2 days later, the white wolf was found dead in the woods, impaled by the spear. The villagers raised the weapon over the village gate, in hope that one day it might greet the Silent One's return. A sword wielded as a symbol of justice by the successive heroes of a kingdom, the church of the land imbued it with powerful magic, so that any who fought for justice would be blessed. The first hero was a great general who smashed an invading army. He killed a score of enemy soldiers by his own hand. The second hero was a great general who defended his country from a mutinous rebellion. He captured each and every one of the mutineers and, by his own hand, carried out their sentence of death. The last hero was a general who invaded and colonized a foreign land. In this conquered country, he ordered the massacre of tens of thousands of innocent lives. An axe used on the executioner's block of the imperial jowls. Forged as an executioner's tool, the axe has severed the heads of more than 1,000 victims. But after it was used to decapitate the very men who forged it, the axe became like a living thing. It seemed to be searching for something as it looped off each head in turn. Once, a popular general was condemned to death. The people watched as he laid his head on the block, and the axe did its bloody work. A headless corpse knows neither innocence nor guilt. Hundreds of years have passed, and still the axe continues its grim search. Scores of rulers and kings have fallen beneath its blade as it wends its bloody way through the pages of history. A wealthy Eastern merchant spared no expense when he ordered the forging of this magnificent glaive. So fine is its blade that when it slices off a man's head, the victim feels no pain at all. Yet it harbors evil powers. Any man who dares look into the blade sees a warped image of his face. The greater a man's greed, the uglier his reflection becomes. When the merchant looked into the blade, he saw a reflection more hideous than any other. He could not bear to see the ugly face, and he swore to never again look at the weapon's shining surface. But one day, a demon whispered in his ears, and he was again tempted to look into the blade. There, he saw a face so abominably deformed and repulsive that he turned the weapon on himself and cut off his own head. A circular blade sword owned by a noble family that lived deep within a great forest. It was said that the user of this weapon would be blessed by the gods with 3 lives. The sword was originally designed as a tool for torture. Its outer blade is sharp enough to bisect a man with one stroke, while the inner is kept dull to inflict hideous pain. Poison can be poured into the handle. As soon as the victim is cut, the poison flows into the wound and causes its nearly instantaneous death. So cruel was this weapon judged to be, it was banned by the old kings. Soon thereafter, it became infamous as the tool of assassins.